We all have a story to tell. Some are just beginning, others have been unfolding for years. Welcome to the Shaman Stories Podcast. Each week, I sit down with guests to explore their journeys into spirit, the challenges, awakenings, and the moments that shaped who they are today. So take a breath, settle in, and join me as we uncover the stories that lead us back to our true selves. All right, welcome to the Shaman Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Chimbert, and today's guest is Lincoln Stoller. He's a
Yes.
quantum physicist, a neuropsychologist, a hypnotherapist, a clinical counselor, a psychonaut, a mountaineer, author, and educator. That's a lot there, but did I miss anything?
No, the question is, did I miss anything? Hopefully I didn't miss anything. Still working on it though.
But yeah, thank you for coming here. And why don't you let people know a little bit about what you do today, and then we'll kind of dive into the story of how you got there.
Oh dear. Um, I'm deeply immersed in what I do to the point that I'm almost obsessive. I've gotten back to physics and I have a lot of catching up to do since I was a physicist in 1980s. That's 46 years of catching up to do. And things do move on, but they don't move on in a very orderly manner. You know, people come up with ideas and they're kind of bullshit, and then they write them up, but they can't write, first of all, even if they can half speak English. And and then they refer you to other things that don't make sense, and it's exhausting. But you know that I think ultimately an education just teaches you how to do the work. It doesn't actually tell you the tools you need to know. It just gives you some sort of resilience and commitment to the idea. So I've been doing a lot of that. And I find therapy is my way of relaxing because I can talk to people about the things that really mean a lot to them, and I can empathize and we can tell each other stories. And that is quite a relief. You know, there's not so much judgment. I mean, there's a lot of judgment, but we don't judge each other.
Right.
So the combination of being hyper rational and emotional has some kind of it swings far in both directions, but it kind of mixes it sort of like whipped cream, you know. It generates something that's sort of sweet. And you know, one of the big issues I think that everybody deals with is how to deal with their demons and how to make peace with the annoying things in your life. And I think you do that by the rhythm method of engaging and disengaging, looking at the negative, exploring the negative, imagining the positive, creating the positive, and then back to the negative. So that's kind of my life is an exploration of the world that's too rational, which is physics, and it really is. I mean, have human beings actually contributed anything positive to the world? I'm not sure. And and the greatest criminals could be the scientists, because you know we think progress is great. I'm not sure it's so great. I mean, if you're into shamanism, there's a certain amount of regress that we'd like to regain connection with the earth and primal forces. So somehow that answers the question of what I do with myself. And then I write and think and do podcasts. I appreciate you and the people like you who I get to talk to. You know, this isn't therapy, this isn't research. It's just sort of like positive bullshitting. So
Yeah.
I
Either
like
that, and
to it.
getting some information out there too of what's possible. Because what drew me when you reached out was like, yeah, you were quantum physics, you were deeply into the science world, and then you mentioned how like you did some shamanic training to a point, but doing ayahuasca, things like that, and kind of shift your perception of reality, I guess is the right way to say it. I mean, and let me know if I'm speaking out of term, but that's kind of how I was perceiving the intro of, what took you down that path. And then, I kind of want to get into the where quantum physics is and where, all these traditions have been. Quantum physics is just now saying, there are multiple dimensions. We all are made of energy. We are these things that, these shamanic medicine men, women have been saying for thousands of years, but now science is finally starting to catch up.
I wouldn't give it so much credit, but okay. You know, there's the public impression of science is always a bit of a fallacy and a kind of window dressing and giving more credit than it's due. I mean, science is mostly solving problems that are narrowly phrased for purposes that are usually financial. And so, you can talk about the mystical connection of everything in the universe, but you're never going to get funded in a science project talking that way. So the people who do science tend to be not the mystical, open-minded, searching types. They tend to, I've never, I'm not a good scientist in the sense that I just never found much attraction to the science community. I didn't, which is why I got involved with ceremonial, cultural, travel, adventure, and all that other stuff, which is what I did. And
Well,
I still, the most insightful people, well, I think all of the shamans that I knew were insightful. They just have an insightful vibe. They're open and they're humorous and they're engaged. I would say that's a good demonstration, a good profile of a shaman. And they're not exactly healers, not all of them. Some of them are just explorers, or often they call themselves intermediaries. They're calling in the energies. They're not doing the healing. They're just
yeah, exactly.
bringing it to bear. And in contrast, the scientists are just a boring bunch of uh, people who can't take a joke, as far as I'm concerned. So I've met a few great scientists, but they haven't been typical. They've been very atypical, and it also changes with the generations. There were times when science was more philosophical and more metaphysical, and other times when it was very financial and political. And right now we're at an interesting time where, you know, academics are being disparaged and universities are struggling and a lot of the innovative colleges are going out of business. And and I think the community of scientists is kind of lost right now. It doesn't have a political purpose, doesn't have a spiritual or metaphysical purpose. They have no philosophical grounding, so they're not saying anything very wise. So the stuff you hear about science is all kind of stapled together from people's wishes
Mm.
and a few vocal scientists like, Roger Penrose, or I don't know who else is making waves these days. Weinstein.
Yeah. Well, even I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, Dean Radin. He did
Oh yeah,
like
I know.
experiments to
Well,
see
Dean
if like,
Radin was like heavy into um, psychology and stuff,
yeah,
and I think he's done great work, but I haven't really studied his work. Just read his books. But what were you going to say about Dean?
or just he was doing his magic or his book, Real Magic, basically studying magical rituals or practices in a lab environment and showing that they do have an effect on the outside world and that these things are working, and he still can't explain half of it himself, which is fine, but it's it kind of goes in that old adage that magic is just things that science can't explain right at this moment, or even energy working, or people look at what a shaman does, and some people might think that's magic or some kind of weird sorcery when it's really just, like you said, being intermediary and just allowing, the source to work through you. We're not actually like I say it all the time is I'm not healing you. I'm just helping remove things out of your way so that you can take over. Your energy does all the work. Your spirit guides come in. It's not me. I'm just helping you connect. Like
Yes.
it's an important distinction I always try to make because I'm not sitting there going, you are healed, lay my hands on you and you're done. I'm opening up a channel so that the energy can flow through me into you and do its thing.
I just was talking to a client who's kind of plagued by negative thoughts and has a legacy of ancestors plagued by negative thoughts. And, as you can imagine, I felt my job was to encourage him to create positive thoughts,
Hmm.
even if it seems pointless, fantastic, and ungrounded. Just start by giving yourself a space that's not negative. Create some fertile earth and just see what grows there. And give yourself. I told him, imagine that if you were a painter and you only had one canvas for your whole life, and it just got layers and layers of shit and darkness, and how do you paint over that? I said, don't do that. Get a new canvas. Think of your life as always fertile and
Hmm.
clear. And there's no guarantee that the energies will come. But, I think this is sort of shamanic. You invite them and you make space for them. And then I'm also very big on dream work. And then you see what arises and you try to figure it out. And like most dreams, it never makes any sense, but it makes some kind of sense. It
Hmm.
has an impact, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, almost always disturbing. And that's you in the middle, navigating that. And don't get pissed off that, life is a struggle because otherwise you're dead. So appreciate the struggle.
So, coming from the science background, though, what led you to start, I guess, looking into like shamanic ways, plant medicine, things like that? Like, what took you down that road?
Well, that I think I've made a funny story out of that. I started, well, as a child of adult parents who didn't care about raising kids very much because I was like an afterthought. They were in their 40s and late 40s, and that's late for having kids. And I had a brother and sister who were 10 and 13 years older, so they didn't give a shit about me either. They were off being teenagers. And so I felt alone. So I wanted connection. I wanted answers. I wanted community. And, the worst attitude to have if you want to get something is that you have to have it.
Hmm.
That just doesn't work well. So, I asked too much of my community, my grade school colleagues, my teachers. The teachers don't care. They're just 9 to 5 workers. They're not psychotherapists. I needed a therapist as a kid. So I took up mountaineering, which was a good therapy. It's responsible, real risk, adventure, discovery, all kinds of stuff. And it's, exciting. See new places, imagine new things, and take real responsibility. And after a while, that was very interesting, very positive and formative. But after a while, I started exploring places and saying, what are these cultures? I went to the jungle. I mean, I went to the mountains. I went to the Arctic. And along the way, you pass interesting people and cultures. And that's where I started to explore ceremony and religion, not as an adept, just as a witness, and psychedelics and plant medicine. I'm not a very good, with plants. I'm really not. I don't know why. I must have something to do with attention. But I've gone through trying to raise lots of plants, and psychedelic plants are not easy plants to raise. Aside from datura, not much really grows wild. Although I found tobacco will grow wild, but tobacco's not necessarily a psychedelic. But I've had some enjoyable experience with plants, and I've tried to raise them myself and make my own, DMT ayahuasca, kitchen chemistry, interesting stuff. Not exactly. I mean, I'm a physicist, not a chemist. Chemists are like stinky and patient, and they do all kinds of stuff that requires sitting next to a stove for hours on end. Uh, so I appreciated culture and had some wild experiences with different cultures. And that gives you some reflection on your own culture and the people around you who are not involved. And you start to understand prejudice and stereotyping. And I don't know if you understand other cultures if you're not part of them, but you appreciate them. So that's what sort of led me into this, I guess you'd call shamanic groove. And I kind of think, although, the whole idea that what is a shaman? It's really sort of a North Asian term from Siberian roots. It's, they're called herbalistas or ayahuasqueros. That, and we think of them as, I don't know what we think of them. Some people think shamans are healers, but they're not really healers. They're community intermediaries between the divine and the terrestrial. And usually, if you say to a shaman that you want to be healed, they'll laugh at you and say, well, this is your fucking problem, not my problem. I'm here to just stir up the energies. So I reflect on my own life. What am I trying to do? What am I trying to solve or understand? Is this a hopeless exercise? Who have I brought into my life? Do I understand the demonic forces that I have conjured into existence in my life? Do I appreciate those forces? And like I was saying to my client earlier today, can I clear out the canvas and start with a clean and open heart that will allow something to grow without the expectation that it's going to happen soon, and it's got to happen soon, because that's also a non-starter. The further you reach, the more patient you have to be, I believe. Um, so I'm a kind of extremist. I want to go very far, so I have to be very patient. So I am.
And did you find that there was, from the scientific background to what you were learning with the different cultures and traditions, did you like come into conflict with yourself at some point of like, how can this stuff be possible when I'm learning this in school, or I learned this a long time
Oh, no,
ago?
no, not really. No, I found it quite a bit different. I mean, science is very rational and intellectual, and there's not a great deal of use for being rational and intellectual in spiritual matters. I mean, it will solve practical problems like, how do you get dinner, and what do you, I don't know. I mean, even like taking ayahuasca tastes terrible, makes you throw up.
Yeah.
Um, you know, how does reason help you in that? Not too much. It may, let you count to 10 or something like that. Um, it I would say that there, three things that come up. One is your mind's talking. The other is your emotions going in whichever degree they go, and your body. Learning to listen to your body. We so often ignore our body. We sort of use it like a car. We're looking out the front window and we're not paying attention to the mechanics of our body. And if you do that enough, eventually it'll, creep up on you and break down, and you'll find yourself by the side of the road with your body in illness. In fact, I think I've taken enough ayahuasca. My latest experiences with psychedelics have not been particularly positive. Microdosing makes me psychotic. Ayahuasca makes me sick, and mushrooms just I just haven't found them. I never found mushrooms all that enlightening. Well, because I like the ayahuasca experience of more depth, and the DMT stuff. I
Yeah.
was going to say DMA, but I've never had MDMA.
No, I was just curious because I know a lot of, at least the way I've always pictured most scientists is they're logical. They don't believe in spirits or ghosts or, you know,
Right. That's
all
right.
the mystical stuff, and that to
Well, I don't
even,
either, but that doesn't matter. It's not about believing it, it's using it. I use
yeah,
it all the time. I don't have belief. I don't have any use for religion either. Belief is, it's not, science is practical. Ultimately, it's practical. What can you
yeah,
do with it? And that's the same attitude I take with shamanism and
that makes
art and
sense.
creativity.
Yeah. How can you mix it, take the best pieces? I mean, do you find any of the stuff you learned from those traditions and shamanism as a whole have helped you better be like with your, your therapist, the way you counsel people, with
Oh,
your,
sure. I thought you might say help me with my science, and I'd have to say,
I don't
I don't know about that. I mean, it does give you
know.
patience and resilience and groundedness. And to be a good creative scientist, you have to be well grounded because science is all about dispute and disagreement. And if you're too connected to what other people think, you can't have any original ideas. And then you also have to fail. You have to be willing to fail in everything. If you're going to explore novelty, you're going to
Yeah,
definitely make mistakes. And that's like one of the best indicators of progress is mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, then you should be worried that you're not actually exploring any new territory. So, yes, you ask for, does it help me with therapy? And yeah, it helps tremendously because, like I had this was an experience with Salvia divinorum, which I thought it's called the diviner's sage. And I thought was going to be like an insightful, placid and um, enlightening experience. But it was the most hellacious journey I've ever had. And in that journey, I came to realize that everything I knew about life, my history in the past, was just an invention, an illusion, a dream. And the reality, I was thoroughly convinced, was that I was in hell. And the only thing to do when you're in hell is to kill yourself, is to get out of it any way possible. And from that experience, I completely understand suicidal people.
hmm.
And people who are like parasuicidal, I say, come on, man, it's not as bad. It can get much worse. So, get real. Are you just going to torture yourself, which is fine, or what are you going to do with this? And I can relate to these people. And if they're truly suicidal, I can be there and say, just how dark is it, and why is it so dark? Because maybe it's not reality, and it may be just a big waste of all the energy that you've put into life to just be stuck in a dark hole. So yeah, that was only a 10-minute trip. Was that a 10-minute trip? Salvia. Yeah. I get it sort of mixed up because the reality was that I was sitting in a hotel room on on one reality, and the other reality was that I was in hell. And in between the two is a very brief uh, trajectory through some strange landscape. So it's somewhat confusing. But I do remember that and some other experiences, mostly dream experiences. I'm much more affected by dreams, which I have all the time. And I would also say that perhaps psychedelics have helped me connect with dreams because actually dreaming is harder than using psychedelics because you have to have much more intentional control. Psychedelics just open the door and throw you out. Dreams, the door is not necessarily open at all to dreams unless you work it open.
Well, and so yeah, I wanted to touch because you mentioned that earlier too. You have a book on dreams, and so what exactly are you doing with dreams? Are you just kind of interpreting what comes up and then trying to figure out what you need to work on? Or is there something more deeper than perhaps that with dreams?
Yeah, I would say there's this rational approach to dreams where you try to figure out what they mean and then extract from that the message or the lesson. And I don't subscribe to that at all. Um, that's just a kind of, I think it's kind of a childish exercise. The real exercise that dreams offer you is to be fully immersed in your confusion. Dreams are almost always about confusion and the conflict of things in your mind and heart and body, things you don't know, and an exploration of what is sometimes chaos, what is sometimes dark, and rarely light. They're not, like 25%, even that seems like an exaggeration. 25% of dreams are positive. But I dream a lot, pretty much 3 times a day. I usually wake up some point in the middle of the night or at later in the night with the dreams I remember, and then go back to sleep and wake up in the morning with a dream I remember. And then, because I never get enough sleep because I'm dreaming so much at night, I fall asleep in the afternoon and dream again. And my approach to these dreams is to not understand them and not even remember them, but to re-engage them, reenact them, um, replay them in my mind, and to kind of, it's like scrubbing, trying to see what did I miss in that episode of the dream? What comes into greater clarity if I rub it more? And then the dream never makes sense. It's not about making sense. It's about clarifying conflict. So what conflicts can I clarify? Some of them are emotional. Some of them relate to my intellect, whatever, my life is dealing with. And then after a while, after I've gotten the meat off the bones, I forget them. But at least I've gone through that process and it's digested the conflict to some degree. So this is what, my latest book, actually, I can't even remember what my latest book was. Was it Dreaming? Yes, Dream Yourself into Being was the latest book. And I should mention, if you sign up for my blog, I think you get a free digital copy.
Yep.
In fact, you do get a free digital copy. Um, and the book is about how to approach dreams. Of course, you have to have enough sleep in order to have enough space to spend the extra half an hour thinking about your dreams. You have to organize your schedule so that this all works. And then you have to understand that you're not trying to interpret your dream in some rational framework. You're trying to get engaged with the irrational issue of your dream. So, look at all the scenarios in the dream and just experience how you feel about them and how your feeling shifts or how your feelings are taken through a spectrum of feelings as you shift from one to the other, as the characters become like family or become like threats or make you feel small or make you feel big, attractive, repulsive. And I use the metaphor of the washing machine. It's like you're being put through an agitator and all this stuff is bombarding you, destabilizing you. And then the effort is to recognize it and to regain some composure and not expect that you're going to be blessed with anything. In fact, I think the best thing is to come back to neutral, to start again. Like, okay, now that we've had this experience, can I accept these characters and put them in my life, in some way, or see them in my world until I forget them in the next 24 hours. So dreams are much more impactful and have been more impactful to me than psychedelics. And not to say that I could substitute one for the other, but like I say, I have dreams all the time. And psychedelics are kind of too disruptive for me right now. It's like I don't have a weekend to devote to this stuff, which is what ayahuasca is basically,
Yeah.
preparing, indulging, recovering. Takes a weekend at least.
And
Yeah.
I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
and so with, I guess, the scrubbing of the dreams, as you mentioned, putting it in the agitator, is that more of a like an emotional release or just a way of like clearing the mind of clutter so that you can focus, have more room to focus on other things? Like, what is the ultimate goal, I guess, of scrubbing the dreams and kind of going through them, if it's not to get a lesson or a learn?
Well, I'm not sure whether I'm left with the clean clothes or the dirty water. Uh, and I kind of think that the dirty water is more fertile. Uh, so I'd have to say both. I mean, you come back to wakefulness and the reality of needs and obligations, and there's not a great deal of room for being psychotic in normal daily life. But the psychotic elements of dreams are probably their most valuable aspect. So I try to keep that dirty water. You are the soil, not just the laundry hanging on the drying line. And the laundry on the drying line doesn't grow into anything. You just wear it. It's the dirty water that fertilizes the soil from which things grow. So I think chaos or fertility or all the things that the dream leaves unsaid and unresolved are are the larger meal as much as you can ingest them, remember them, and live them, live the contradictions and the chaos. I mean, this is what a rich life is, a life that includes many things, not a well laundered life, starched and neatly arranged. I mean, there's a place for both. Like I say, daytime life requires some organization, but you get the richest life. You introduced me, and I said, I hope I'm doing enough.
Hmm.
I want to do all these things, and if I live twice as much, I do twice as much. I don't. I regret the people who've, I would say, abandoned me. I I would probably be a very well. You can ask my two ex-wives. I guess I was too much for them because you know, give me an inch and I'll take a mile. Um, I just want this was like the mountaineering experience. You have to be careful. Ask for too much and you'll be buried in an avalanche, and it happens to a lot of people. Um, so we get to things like trauma and childhood experiences. Shamanism is not a. I'm not. I'm not a shaman by trade, but I find myself doing shamanic things with people in
Mhm.
exploring their transitions, their darkness, and you might say calling in the light, which I do mostly with hypnotic techniques. Imagine this and imagine who you could be, or imagine who the character is that represents the best of yourself. If you haven't had that person, could you put them together from your memories? So I'm kind of doing a shamanic thing. I'm calling in the energies.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I, I mean, I have a frame drum here. I haven't picked it up with my therapy clients, but I have other musical instruments. This thumb piano here and a keyboard next to me. And rhythm is very important. both auditory and mental and emotional rhythm. So those are the things that I've drawn from shamanism into my therapy practice. Maybe
Yes.
that doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the best I can do.
No, I think it does because I mean I personally believe that we all have these abilities. We all have the access to do everything. It's part of it's just learning and remembering. And a lot of us just never knew it, right? I grew up very logical in the military, working on computers, things like that. Shamanism was never on my bingo card, like I like to say. It came into my life and it changed it in a way that made a lot of sense for me and was great. But there's ways that you can use the same tools and techniques in everyday life without having to get some initiation. You can do all of these things. You can journey on your own. You can do plant medicine and have your own self-awareness. Like all these things are possible and we all have the ability, and it's how we use what we learn and make our lives and other people's lives better. That's all that matters. And so taking what works and putting away what doesn't for your clients, and still mixing in traditional therapy or hell, even quantum physics and anything else that you learn, the hypnotherapy, like all that stuff goes together and can work just well.
How did you make a transition from military to shamanism? Was it one step or many?
Many, many steps.
Hmm. Was it like Michael Harner, or was it Siberia? Where did you learn it?
Um, I would say I'd learned the basic journey work is, I guess you would call the Michael Harner technique, the course shamanism. I learned it from a guy named Paul Francis in England. So I started
Uh-huh.
taking some of his courses, and I felt that would work great. I felt there was something more to it that I needed to learn. So then I studied with the Quiro tribe in Peru, learned different techniques, built my own mesa, went through an initiation process. And then later on, I started working with clients and then started running into like dark entities, things like that. Then I found a shaman in South Africa. He taught me better extraction techniques. And so I've been just kind of mixing and matching all the different pieces together and making it my own. And now I'm learning like quantum alchemy stuff where I'm taking in different symbols and doing different clearings that way, and just really just manipulating the energy field in a way that's beneficial for the client or the person I'm working with, including myself. Like everything I've done on others, I do on myself first just to see what it's like and to see what will happen. I've done ayahuasca multiple times, mushroom ceremonies, all those good things as well. Haven't done the other stuff that you mentioned, but ayahuasca for sure. I've done plenty of those ceremonies.
Sure, yeah. Um, do you, just out of curiosity, no, actually, I'm not even curious. I was going to ask, do you integrate psychedelics given that they're not legal? But you don't need to, I don't think. It's not necessarily a part of shamanism.
No, I mean, people ask. I know people they can go to, but it's one, I don't have the space to truly facilitate that. And it's better to
Yeah.
do it with someone who has the right set, the right place, the right setting. You want to make sure you're with a facilitator that does this on a normal basis, knows what they're doing. So I
Yeah.
have plenty of friends that I trust, like my ayahuasca facilitator. Her and her husband have trained down in Peru with the Shabibu tribe multiple times. They go on a yearly thing to get update training and to work with the tribe, and then they bring it back and they facilitate on their property type of thing. So
Yes, I
that's
understand
not,
that.
yeah, there's just, it wasn't my path to learn, but to use and work with, yes.
So it sounds like you're more, if there were to be, could you're a therapist as well as
No,
you're not a therapist,
no,
but you work to heal people?
yeah.
Well, to me, that's a semantic
I mean, there's
difference.
therapy involved. I haven't been to school to,
That's right.
you
I
know,
should have avoided that term.
yeah.
It's a legal term. Yeah.
It's like, I guess, the acceptable term at this point would be like a coach or a life coach or something,
Right, right.
because,
That's right.
but it's not I didn't go to school for years and get a psychology
Certificate,
degree and
sure.
become a therapist. But I mean,
Well,
I
lucky
do.
you didn't too, because I would not endorse most of that um, idea of mental illness is kind of contrary to the transformational idea that I
Yeah.
think pervades shamanism.
And I believe there is some place for it, but I mean, I did a continent. I'm saying it wrong, but CPT, the cognitive processing therapy. I did that for
CBT,
my.
CBT, yes.
Yes, CBT. I did that
Yeah.
for my PTSD, but I didn't find any value. It just kept triggering me more,
Oh,
having to
funny.
rewrite everything over and over. It just
Yeah,
didn't
well,
work for
not
me.
surprised.
But I believe for some people, if that works for you, great. But I believe trauma can hit different layers, and if we don't hit all the different layers, including, the mind, the body, spirit, and the emotional layer of things, we're not truly going to clear ourselves. And so we need to address it at different ways and different levels. And that could be working with someone like me to clear out the energetic imprint. That could be doing yoga or some sort of somatic release. A good massage therapist could know what they're doing. A good therapist for the mental could work well, and for the emotion, but there's different layers, and it really just depends on how deeply it's rooted in what you need as a person.
Would it be, could I ask, how do you approach a new client? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Uh,
It depends on what they're looking for. Usually they already have an issue that they're trying to work on, right? So maybe it's anxiety. We'll just use that as an example, or addiction. Depending on what's going on in their energetic field, I might need to do a different way of clearing it. There might be a soul loss that needs to be attributed or brought back for that issue. There could be dark external entities attached to them that need to be cleared. I kind of when I do the intake, I do a lot of scanning, talking, listening, try to see where their common themes are. Perhaps it's just a story they created when they were a child. Perhaps there's no story that they can think of at this moment, but it's something from a past life that they're carrying with them. And so it's really just allowing them to talk for a little bit, listen to their story that they've created, and then try to see where the solution might be. So kind of therapy, but
yeah, yeah. Well, I
beneficial.
mean, right. I mean, it is therapeutic
Yeah.
to avoid the loaded words. Um, and how, well, this is a vague question. How do you know if you're finished? Or how do you know? Do you just wait for yours to be told? Or do you have a vision of what finished could be for a given person?
It's different for each person. There's no finality until we get through some of the work. So sometimes a person just needs 4 sessions. Sometimes they might need a little bit longer. It A lot of it plays with how willing they are to want to do the work too, because I'll give them homework. So it depends on how invested they are in themselves and the change,
Sure.
as well as the work I'm doing. Because again, it's not just about what I'm doing, they have to play a part of it as well. And if they're not willing to truly play the full part, then they're not going to get everything they need to. And it could be as simple as, yeah, we're working on this addiction, we're clearing out the imprints and some of the root causes, but you still need to take action to not drink the bottle, because there's a physical side to that addiction too.
I find a lot of people, or everybody, doesn't know exactly what they're coming for. You know, they see the first step that's right in front of them, but most people recognize that there are going to be other steps after that.
Yeah.
and they're not going to look exactly like the step that's in front of them. Other issues, other people, other obstacles, other time frames, investments. And I like to try to get a picture of what the steps could be. And it would be nice if we agreed and pursued those steps. But I have to recognize that that's my fantasy, that I understand the person. And it's their decision to make, even if they choose to cast me as a negative, you know,
Mm.
pushing them too far, pushing them in the wrong direction. I get some people who just come to me because they want me to support their negative habits, you know, that it's okay to be exploitative of people or self-deprecating or a victim. And when I feel like I'm being somewhat used, I'm kind of slow. I'm the last person to realize what's going on. Then I'll object, and then I might be discarded as not helpful to their nefarious purposes, and
Yeah.
that's okay. You know, I don't really know.
Yeah, it can always be interesting. I've had some clients where it's like we're talking and I can clearly see that the issue is some trauma that happened with their mother back when they were like 3 years old, but they don't want to address it at this moment. They want me to work on their money blocks. And I'm like, Your mother's the reason for all this. We need to work on that." But, or they'll come back and it's like, "Well, now I want to work on this." Like, but we said we were going to, you wanted to work on this. Like, this is your true block right here. And this block is what's causing all these other issues you have. But sometimes they're just not ready to do that work. They want to hit that surface level.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
what do you
like,
do? You just have to let them. They won't work on what they don't want to work on.
yeah,
So that's
you just got to try to give the advice, see what they want to do, and then just kind of go from there. But yeah.
well, I do like, and sometimes use the hypnosis to. I mean, I've always liked doing past life regressions with people, and it's kind of a wild card that you can draw if they're willing to do it,
Mhm.
because the agreement is that we're going to spend 2 or 3 hours just going through whatever comes up in your mind and weaving it into wherever it goes. I do encourage people to engage in as much chaos as possible, because chaos is like fertility and ideas and openness. And it's been my experience that if I do a past life regression with people, that's usually the last time I'll see them for quite a while. Probably because it's so not focused. I mean, it doesn't have a next step. I wouldn't give people homework after a past life regression. I mean, maybe it could be done, but what I do is I record it, I transcribe it, and I give it to them in written and audio form. And it usually goes through so many places and so many lives and half lives or not even lives that I can't put it all together. And I just give it to them, load it on them to review and reflect on. Unlike the therapy where you give them homework and say, come back next week and we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't do it often. Also, it's expensive. It takes like 4 hours, um, the way I do it. I do, I should mention it, ask everybody to engage in some form of structured brain training, which is a mix of mindfulness and biofeedback and these little devices that do transcranial stimulation. You can, they pipe in a brain frequency that's supposed to entrain you and make
Interesting.
you, give you a mood, either enervate you or sedate you. And so I ask everybody to do some form of that. And often, in fact, it just becomes a talking point. They don't actually do it. We just keep talking about it. And I keep saying, what you need is space. What you need is calm. What you need is relaxation. What you need is energy. And maybe that gets through at some point. I've found it to be very useful among many of my tools.
Interesting. What are these devices?
Well, the first of all, they have to be affordable. So that limits the devices to a certain category. One is called the Muse, M-U-S-E. It's a headset that reads your brain waves and feeds back to you in an auditory volume, either music or an environmental background sound, the amplitude of certain brain waves so that you can hear in the music or the nature sounds, in the volume of the music and the nature sounds, the level of the brainwave activity. And in that way, you can learn to control it or at least become aware of it. That's one. The transcranial ones are actually cheaper. They just pipe in a frequency through your two contacts on your head. You can put those contacts in various places. And they just basically entrain your brain, not that different from the way music entrains your attention, but they do it in a silent electrical way. And the idea is that you become more flexible by adopting those rhythms repetitively. And that will hopefully, if you're depressed, make you less depressed. If you're anxious, make you less anxious. If you're an insomniac, make you sleep better. Um, or if you're too fuzzy-headed, make you more focused. Those basic sort of cognitive skills, which underlie your whole life and can be essential in getting your shit together. Um, you can only erect a structure with the bricks that you've got to work with. And if you can't focus, well, certain things are going to be really difficult, or if you can't relax. Um, so, those are called transcranial stimulation. And they're of two types, but they're relatively cheap. Oh, the company that I use is called Neuromist, and Neuromyst. I don't know. However you spell it, it comes up when you search for it.
Okay.
And or is it Neuromyst? Um, so those are two of them, and there's always just mindfulness meditation if you can do it. Um, and then what I do in my office here is a more targeted form where I actually look at your whole brainwave profile and try to decide which brainwave patterns associate with your problems and how working on those patterns could address your problems. It's a very guesswork kind of thing. And most people find that, I think my guesswork is kind of pointless. What most people find is that simply working with their brainwaves creates a reorganization that it's kind of like a reset or a reboot.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives them the flexibility to see things differently. So those are all mechanical, neurological approaches to what is ultimately a personal or even spiritual problem. I mean, if you think of spirituality as a combination of attention and engagement and recollection, memory, trauma, which it is, then your brain's function engages all those things. So I try to get people to work on that and at least not overlook it. And then, as you know, there's issues of exercise and nutrition, digestion, sexuality, relationships. It all gets, before you know it, the whole thing's just a confusing mess. And you have to just come back to your client to say, what out of this, you know, huge mess of possibilities strikes you as the most attractive issue to work on. They all come back to the same central issue, whether
Yeah.
you're talking about your mother or your money.
Yep. Yeah, there's usually always a connection. It doesn't matter if they realize it or not. That is
That's
true.
right. Yeah, and this is where I like shamanism, because you're making a story, and the story is fertile and impactful, but it's not necessarily true. It doesn't need to be. You could throw away the story when you're finished with it.
Yep. That's interesting. And then with I guess, what mindfulness meditations do you recommend? Is there like a specific one that's simple enough for everyone to do?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I haven't gone that route because I don't. I want them to get a device that they invest in that will have a clock and make them do it regularly. And I don't even care what its effect is, as long as they're committed and regular and inquisitive. So I would say any meditation which you do regularly, sincerely, and with effort is going to be productive. And maybe all of them will do the same thing, no matter which route you take, because it's your effort that's going to make the difference, ultimately, I think, more than
Yeah.
whatever mechanical device. So yeah, I mean, you could go to, I don't know, John Kabat-Zinn is the one who made mindfulness meditation popular, and he's got some website. All these people have little cottage industries that they try to get you in. I don't like any of them because they cost money, and I think this is a very simple process that requires your engagement. So, I'd say, my earlier book was called Operating System for Enlightenment, I think, which is when I talk about all these different ways of foundationally enhancing yourself. And, dreams, sleep, diet, exercise, emotional engagement, trauma, relationships. I think they all have to play a role. And the more you include, the more synergy you get. Shamanism, therapy, analysis, health, right? Physical health.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's those multiple layers we need to be looking at to truly get the healing. And the I never heard of those machines, but that's definitely, I'm gonna look into it because that sounds pretty cool to at least try for sure.
I'll send you, let me just make sure if I have your, looking. Oh, yeah, Shenvert at Gmail. Okay, so I'll send you a couple of pieces that I wrote that explain those things.
Okay, cool. And then before we start wrapping up, looking at your website, like you do have a lot of books. Like, is there a good like good book to start with? I guess if you're going down this path or just wanting to learn. I mean, I know you mentioned the new one, the Dreaming Yourself into
The
Being,
being.
but you also have like Becoming Super Genius, the Learning Project.
The couple of areas here. The Obviously learning is important. We're talking about change and things like that. Where's the books? So the three books on the top, or my first three books, the Learning Project. It was an interviews with inspiring people, asking them how they learned and what they got from it. And I talked to old people and young people and middle-aged people in a dozen different fields, and tried not to summarize what they were saying because it was their voice and not mine. And the next two books, The Becoming Super Genius, then took the lessons in those interviews and stated them and explored them. So the first book was other people speaking. The next two books were me trying to interpret what they said. It's all about learning and finding purpose and direction. And it's obviously different at different points of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the old people had these very practiced stories about who they were and what they did. And the young people were wonderful because they couldn't finish a sentence. They kept going off on tangents. And it was full of potential and energy. Very different. And so there was no one answer to that learning project. And then the next three books, I'm just looking at my website of how I've organized them, were about sleep. The Path to Sleep was about relaxing into sleep with the premise being that it's important, not just for your physical, but your mental health. And then a book called Becoming Lucid was about the different states of awareness, sleep awareness, wakeful awareness, and the intermediary states. A very short book which people have liked. And the last on that series was Dreaming Yourself into Being, which obviously involves sleep and lucidity and awareness and dreams. And I'm going through the whole thing. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because your question was where to start. I think Operating Manual for Enlightenment, which is one of the recent books, was about how the different pieces of what you could do could be used.
Okay.
It mentions dreams, it mentions meditation, it mentions sleep and health and other things. But I think I don't know if this is the easiest book, but it's the most operational book.
Okay.
And I think that's important. So that's the one I advocate.
Nice.
Operating Manual for Enlightenment.
Like I said, I'll definitely put a link in the show notes too that people can see what we're talking about and look at what you have. But I was
If you
looking
click
through
on the
them and I was
book,
like,
it will take you to a page where it's described
nice.
and so forth. Yeah. And well, I'll ask you the same question. If people came to you and asked you for a primer or a description of your process, what would you tell them would be a place to start?
That's a good question. There is a book. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Oh, I don't know if I see it. Yeah, it's called Masters of Living Energy. It actually talks about some people who went down to Peru and were learning with the Quero shamans and kind of like their process and what they did and what they went through.
Great. Because
It's actually,
Masters of Living Energy, was that what it's called?
yep.
Yeah. Just make sure. Yeah, I see. There it is, a book. Um, I'll look into that because I want to I want to answer that question too, but I'd like to hear other people's answers to it. So
No, it's a good book, and it was one I found after I'd already started my path, and I was like, oh yeah, this makes a whole lot of sense. It was one of those nice ones when I read it. There was also Bill Plotkin. I'm looking at my shelf. Let's see, it was Bill Plotkin. Journey of the Soul was a good one too. Let me double check that to make sure I'm saying the right one. Bill.
well, you got the right guy, but I didn't get to a book page.
Yeah, so Bill Plotkin. He's got a lot of good books, but A Journey of the Soul Initiation. That's what it was. That was a good book too.
Okay. Thanks. Useful. All right. Good. Good.
Cool. All right. Do you have any, I guess, parting wisdom or any advice you want to share with those listening? And then after that, I guess just let them know where they can find you and if they want to work with you. Obviously, I'll put the links in the show notes where you get your books and all
Well,
that good stuff.
it's hard to know what to say because, like you said, people will just work on what they're committed to. I encourage people to engage with the highest level, which is planetary and species. I think a lot of people's problems aren't even theirs. Their family, legacy, lineage, and you're not going to solve them. You may discard some of the baggage you've inherited, but the best thing you can do is to be a guide or role model for people around you. It's not really about how to, make a happy life for yourself. That's kind of selfish. It's about how to be of service. And I think the best value you get for your money in terms of life investment is being useful in the larger role to your family and maybe your community and perhaps the world. The wider your scope, the less power you have.
Yep.
So you have to deal with that. But the greater reach you might have. So write a book or speak to people or engage strangers. Um, take risks and do work. And don't ask a reward. I think
Hmm.
that's a mistake to be contingent in what you do based on what you get.
Yep.
That sort of limits your achievement to whatever you can imagine. And you should go beyond what you can imagine.
And,
So
and
contact me and sign up for my blog, which is free. And if you do, you get a free copy of that latest book, Dreaming Yourself into Being. And it's a digital copy. And you can contact me at the website is mindstrengthbalance.com and talk to Jeremy, talk to anybody. Just start putting yourself out to do the work that's most important. And I think if you're open and a goodwill and have a certain amount of commitment, you will, as you know, call in the energies.
yep, I like that. Yeah, it's do. I always tell people that do as much local as you can, and that's going to make the ripple effect. Work with yourself, your family, your community. Because, like you said, if you try to fix the world's problems, especially when they're on the other side of the world, you lose the power. There's only so much you can do. Don't stop trying, but the more we focus internally and locally, I find that usually has a bigger impact on the world as a whole. Taking
Mhm.
care of the trees, the plants, the animals, our community as a whole makes everybody stronger in the long run.
Yes. So that's kind of my parting words as well.
Yeah.
Uh, be of be visionary and be uh, ultimately respect yourself. Realize that you are an important asset, and don't let it go to waste.
I like that. So I appreciate your time, man. This was a lot of fun, and thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Jeremy. Let me know if I can do anything.
Okay. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if something our guests shared resonated with you, connect out to them. That's what these stories are here for. And if you're looking for deeper healing or support, you can always find me at pnwshamanichealing.com. See you in the next episode.